Good morning, everyone. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Abhay Gupta, founder and CEO of Bidgely. I have with me a great panel here, Bill from Pacificorp and Venkat from ERCOT. I'll invite them to introduce themselves.
Great. Yeah, I'm Bill Comeau from Pacificorp. I'm the Vice President of Customer Experience. Pacificorp serves 6 states in the West. We're a little unique because we're still vertically integrated, which means we're responsible for our generation, transmission, and the distribution side of the business.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Venkat or Venkat. I work for the Grid and the Market Operator of Texas, ERCOT, and I serve all the technology development and operation support teams at ERCOT, and I also spearhead all the research, innovation, and transformation efforts at ERCOT. Happy to be here. Thank you, Abhay, for the invite to be on this panel, and thanks to ETS folks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Welcome both. I'll start by sharing what Bidgely does for a minute. Bidgely is the premier energy AI company, and we have invented the behind-the-meter energy AI on the smart meter data, which allows us to understand and know our customers, what's happening in the homes. In today's day and age, it's hard to imagine running your business, running your operations without knowing your customers. I mean, the best examples in the consumer world are your Googles and Amazons and Netflix of the world. As in the energy industry, how do we know our customers? So what we have done is, by using the energy AI on smart meter data, AMI data, we are able to identify what's happening behind the meter, which customer has what appliances, who has EV, when are they charging, when did they buy, are they charging level 1, who has a heat pump, who has pool pump, is it single speed, is it variable speed? Just knowing your customers deeply by using your own data allows us to actually transform our business in many different ways, which is the topic for today. How do we apply this AI to both customer side and the grid side? And we have an expert on the customer side, because Bill has been running the customer operations for many years, also has his hands dirty with the grid side. And then we have Venkat from ERCOT, from ISO, who's obviously seeing the big picture of the grid side. Now, one thing I would like to say, for the last few years, everybody in the industry has completely recognized the combination of customer and grid. You have all the DERs adopted by customers, and in order to manage our grid, we need to make sure that we are also managing customers' load, which is where the whole VPP, virtual power plant, terms, platforms come into picture. But our focus today will be how do we apply AI to both sides, to the customer side and the grid side. And what Bidgely has done is, it has actually created a flywheel to say, you start by knowing your customers, what's happening in it, help them with the customer management, customer experience. Then you come to the grid and identify, how does the adoption of the DERs affect my grid? Which of my grid assets are going to be affected? And then you go back to customers to say, how can I enroll them, have them participate in the whole grid load management? So with that, let me invite Bill by asking a question. Bill, tell us, first of all, in your customer operations, how do you see the role of AI, and what have you done to transform the customer experience by the use of data, use of AI in your customer experience?
I wanted to talk just a little bit about how AI, it seems like everything is AI now. We get vendors come to us that we've had for a long time and say, oh, we now have AI tools, we do things. And I will say one of the big challenges we've had is actually, what is AI for us? And then how do we implement it, and how do we actually utilize it? AI is here for the future. The challenge that we have now is taking that opportunity and thinking about how we deploy it and how we get the best use case for it. On our side, when we look at the opportunity and what's available, we've started to look at the customer data that we currently have, utilize it to be able to give to our teams, and to be able to look at it, just identify opportunities, everything from the solar batteries to EVs, and to be able to target those customers. So the AI component's a little bit challenging because some of this stuff that we've typically had it is being called AI. So I think defining it, understanding, and thinking about what we need to do with it. But the potential and what we're seeing for it and our ability to engage with the customers and to utilize our grid much more efficiently is how we're looking at the AI component. And the good thing is, if you do have partners that already are looking at your data, Bidgely does that. We do it with Bidgely. And I'm actually here because ETS asked me to come speak. Then I recommended that we bring Bidgely because they said it was how I'm utilizing it. So when I think of AI, we already have a huge amount of data because of some of the partners that we're utilizing, with like Bidgely being one of them, and we're taking that to the next level. We're now looking at it, utilizing it for EVs to identify where there's opportunities. We're looking at it the load side from the congestion side, and we're also looking at it from a customer engagement perspective. It's just the tip of the iceberg, and I think the challenge is getting the right partners, figuring it out, and then think about how you can utilize it in a very cost-effective way and have a good journey for it.
Thank you, Bill. Venkat, tell us about your core problem. You represent ISO. What is the problem that you're facing right now?
I mean, I can go on and on about all the different problems that we are facing here in Texas, but I look at problems more as opportunities. If you all have noticed, the projections for the demand growth within Texas have skyrocketed. Right now, our peak is 85 gigawatts that we set back in 23. But if you look at the projections for 2030 and beyond, they are almost doubling. Right? That number keeps changing all the time. In fact, if you don't discount all the numbers that we are getting from the transmission service providers, that number is like 218 gigawatts last time I checked. Right? How much of that will really materialize, that's a different question. But the load growth is phenomenal in Texas. And so does the changing resource mix in Texas, right? So you are moving away from sort of the traditional fleet to more of variable energy resources, and that trend is not stopping either. And of course, I cannot escape any conversation these days without talking about the projected data centers that are moving into Texas and the amount of, the gigawatts of load that they are trying to bring. And trying to pull the sort of the supply and the demand side together with the transmission and distribution. We have all sorts of opportunities, Abhay, in terms of making sure that the lights are on, the grid is reliable, and the markets are efficient, which is sort of a core mission of ERCOT.
Great. So that leads me to the actual question. You have had recent experience working with us in a very small fashion on really realizing what can AI do on your meter data. I mean, in Texas, we know meter data is available through Smart Meter Texas portal in full capacity. So now that you understand what is possible art of AI on the meter data to understand what's happening behind the meters in the homes, how can you use that AI and the knowledge that comes out of the data to solve your problem?
I think, given that we are in the business of keeping the supply and demand balanced all the time, for some of the challenges that we are seeing, the answer is not always on the supply side. The answer is also on the demand side and the flexibility that the demand provides. And so ERCOT is gung-ho about load flexibility in general. And for years, we've had the ability for load resources to participate in our ancillary services, to participate in our energy market. And so they could right now dip into all sorts of ancillary services like reg-up, reg-down, responsive reserve service, non-spin, ECRS, etc. And we also have traditional emergency response services. And there are a bunch of other programs that TDSPs run. There's 4CP programs, et cetera, right? But then there is a lot of untapped potential in our opinion, right? And I'm just going to run some numbers. And don't quote me on these numbers. They're not very precise, but they're in the ballpark. There are about 10 million residential households within Texas. And out of those 10 million, we know that about 1 million of them have some sort of smart devices within the premises. And when we look at the demand response numbers, ERCOT runs a survey every year. We get the information on how many folks actually participated in the demand response. And we see that number being just about 100K or maybe 200K. So we know there are 10 million. There are already 1 million which have some sort of smart devices. And only 10% of those are actually participating in any sort of demand response. So for us, it's potential that exists out there. These thermostats exist in the people's houses. They're just not getting leveraged. And so we see huge potential, Abhay, in terms of leveraging that flexibility that residences have, and the work that we did with you is getting to know more precisely what's behind a meter. Yes, we do an annual survey. We get a lot of information on the easy IDs and what's which easy ID is participating in what program, etc. But we don't have clear visibility on, is there a EV behind this particular easy ID? Is there a PV behind this easy ID? Is there a battery behind this easy ID? Is there a smart thermostat behind this easy ID, right? What kind of heating do they have? Do they have electric heating or gas heating, etc.? So the work that we did with Bidgely gave us some transparency in terms of, okay, this is what exists. That helps us with the potential and maybe working with our reps and others to come up with some very targeted programs.
Fantastic. So I think like Venkat said, knowing who has EV, that's actually easy. It's not that hard knowing who has EV. But knowing at what level do they charge, when do they charge, how frequently do they charge, and then who has solar, but also what's the generation size. Just knowing the entire profile means you can actually estimate the capacity of load shifting. So since the theme here is the grid and the customer intermingling circles, I'm going to then pose the next question to Bill. Bill, let's say either Venkat or your grid folks identified 80% of the customers who have the potential, but they are not participating in your load flexibility programs right now. As an expert on the consumer side, how would you invite and influence those customers to actually come and participate? Now that you have the list of people who have these flexibility loads, but they're not yet participating in your programs, how would you invite them? How would you bring them into your programs? Like either messaging, personalization, quantification of benefits. So how do you invite those people into your VPP or load flexibility programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really comes down to the possibility. So when we think of our service territory, if I just talk about Utah, we have about 100,000 customers that have rooftop solar. We have tens of thousands of customers that have EVs, and then how do we work with them to be able to put in these advanced opportunities? Is on the solar side, is specifically batteries, being able to control it and work with it. On our side, it really is all about having customer-centric programs. Programs that are easy for the customer to participate. AC load control program, it's set it, forget it. They don't have to think about it. We chose to do a switch side because it just makes it, you don't have to worry about the actual thermostat for the customer piece. But it really comes back to the customer. What is it that works for them? Our customers, majority of them, they don't want to think about energy. Yeah, they don't mind participating in programs, but if you make it difficult or if it becomes inconvenient, you lose a large percentage of them. So our perspective is you start with the customer first, then you think about the opportunity. Our grid is highly unutilized. We've got it's no different than most utilities, a few hundred hours that we just have to really plan for that peak. And so what we've really been trying to do is target customers that have the highest opportunity to be able to help with the grid. For us, most recently, it's been our VPP program with batteries. So our battery program allows us, when they participate, we have to have qualified batteries. When they participate, we're charging those batteries every day during peak solar time period. We're in the West, a lot of cheap energy at that time. We're discharging them during peak period, and we also utilize them for frequency response, which means they're being utilized for real time. Over 99% satisfaction rate, it's seamless to the customers, but when we look at the potential and when we look at our roadmap, because of the customer-friendly option and the value that we're able to get from it and from the credit, getting the credit and the incentive for the customer aligned, we're able to pull the full value stack out of our battery solution. That's what's getting us the penetration. In Utah, we're now seeing over 50% of our installations that used to be we'd call customer generation are now battery only, and our solar installers are targeting those customers that already have solar to help with the grid. So in summary, it really is customer-centric, making sure that you're going after the biggest bang for the buck, and sometimes having too much noise for customers with all these great potential programs, but it doesn't provide a big value. It creates noise for customers. We've heard that from them. What is it you really want us to do? Focus on the things that really matter. So just be careful. Think about how you want to engage with the customers and look at the big bang for the buck and make it super easy for them and work with the partners that help enable that.
Thank you, Bill. Just adding to what you said, we noticed that when we were running and we were actually seeing the industry running the EV managed programs without any targeting, without knowing what's happening behind the scenes, um, you would generally enroll every customer. First of all, it's hard because if you don't know who has EV, you're broadcasting your message. You are now relying on customers self-selecting themselves to participate in your program. As a result, it's not targeted, and the end result there was in non-targeted fashion. The average load reduction per car when the event is called is about 0.3 kilowatts per car or per EV. Remember, an EV is charging at, let's say, between 8 and 10 kilowatts, and on an average, you're getting zero point 0.3 simply because not every EV is charging in peak hours and not every EV is charging at the time of calling the event. So average was 0.3. When we started targeting customers based on, it's a positive way, like this, which customer is actually in the region of congestion or is charging the car in the peak hours. And while everybody is allowed to participate in the program, there's no blocking, but the specific targeting got us straight to 1.3 kilowatts per car. So it was like over 3x benefit, which means your program cost of running your programs is going to be 1/3 or somewhere in the range of half to 1/4 when you start knowing what's happening behind the scenes. Now, today, we notice that most of the programs, I mean, the smart thermostat programs are at a larger scale, but EV programs are in very small scale. So the cost that most utilities are bearing in running a pilot program is okay, but if you want to scale it up to 100,000 EVs 5 years later, it's not affordable because now you are paying hundreds of dollars in incentives and cost for EVs, which are not actually contributing back to your load flexibility. So knowing your customers with load flexibility directly results in affordability of the programs, and these programs directly become part of the rate plans because so you're actually doing the favor to your customers by not overloading their rates by not targeting, and your cost of the programs is much higher. So I'll move on. Bill, something interesting we know about most of the programs on EV in the industry are focusing on kilowatt hours or kilowatts, the demand capacity. But you chose to run frequency response using EV managed charging programs, which is unique per my knowledge in the industry. Can you tell us why you do that, and how does that play a role in the grid flexibility and grid resilience? Because you are running frequency program while others are running capacity program using the EV.
Yeah, and let me, so the main difference, so our EV program and our demand response programs in general are focused more on frequency and fast real-time response, which really means within 30 seconds. The reason for that is because we have huge amounts, we're the largest wind owner in the West. There's huge amounts of solar in the West, and you've all heard of the duck curve, you've seen the value and where the market is lacking is really this frequency response. There's two areas for that. There's the generation and transmission level is really where we focus, develop our programs, because you just can't go to the market and you can't buy it. Very difficult. You have to have a spinning reserve, natural gas plant, whatever it may be. Huge value there. So when we partnered and looked with where the greatest need was and being able to come back and think of the grid of the future and you think of a future that's more sustainable, more renewables, much more resources, a lot of distributed energy resources included with them. It has to have this flexibility. It has to have real-time flexibility. So that's why we focused on the EV side. It's small at this point, but what we're really building for is for the future. When we did some fun modeling around EVs, even though EVs could increase our loads, if you had a huge penetration, get to 50, 80, 60%, 10, 20% increase our loads, we're confident that we could still utilize the existing grid for EV charging for the vast majority of it without having to really increase the infrastructure. And that's through our time of use rates, the frequency response, and without the frequency response perspective of it to be able to help the grid in short durations. And then the second piece is we're taking it to the distribution level. So then our distribution planners are now utilizing some of the AI, playing with the AI tools to review it. And then we're also deploying our demand response, which includes EVs, penetration, those types of things. So it really is about planning for the future and the grid of the future and what's needed to be able to learn from it and setting that foundation for it. That's why we're focused on frequency response.
Yeah, thank you. Good.
I think it's fascinating for me to see that EVs are participating in frequency response. From a Texas perspective, back in 22, we started this aggregated DER pilot within Texas, where we said we'll do 80 megawatts of energy with 40 megawatts of ancillary services, starting out with non-spin. And then we quickly realized that, and these are aggregations of essentially batteries participating as an aggregated device in the market. And then there was a demand that, hey, we extend the non-spin service to ERCOT contingency reserve service as well, which is a 10-minute product, and which we did back in 23, I think. And so we dabbled in non-spin, we dabbled in ERCOT contingency reserve, but not necessarily into the frequency response kind of ancillary services. In Texas, we do have reg up and reg down and RRS, which I don't think the aiders can actively participate. But I think that is something that our folks are very interested in. It's good to see that Pacificorp actually has done that.
So Venkat, another question for you. Now that you can see the path to identifying where is the capacity, which homes, which appliances, which IoTs, you are 1 or 2 steps removed from customer. How do you plan to actually realize that load capacity, since you can't go directly to the customers and talk to them? So what's your plan there?
I think right now, the way we interact with the customers is through the retail electric providers. And ERCOT, as I just mentioned, we do have a aider that used to be a pilot, but now it is sort of moving away from being a pilot into maybe goes into the protocols, and it's finding its way now within the ERCOT market participant world. But that's a venue where we are saying that's how we will encourage, right? I mean, we might increase the size of the megawatts for participating in aider. The other thing that we are doing, Abhay, very specifically is we recently had a workshop where we proposed a residential DR program. And again, that program is more tailored towards retail electric providers who are in the competitive areas, and also for the NOE areas within Texas as well, where we are saying, well, we only see about 100 megawatts or so of demand response during critical hours of the day in summer, for example. But we do know, as I said, the potential exists for a gig or maybe even 2 gigs, right? And what we are trying to do is incentivize and say, well, we will pay you a certain amount, right, so that you can enroll some of these customers and start participating in the demand response programs. And right now, we are looking at what is the cost of new entry for generating units within Texas, and trying to see how many times we might have events where we ask for demand response and trying to come up with a number. So right now we said it could be, right, again, this is all being debated right now. It could be as high as $17 per kilowatt hour, right? And so this is very, very lucrative, because we know that the things are out there and we need to tap into that, and we are trying to provide mechanisms for reps to go and start soliciting and getting people into the program.
This is beautiful. And where I would say is a perfect example in front of us, what I call dynamic pricing, is Uber. Every single time you open Uber, you have no clue what you will see as a charge, because it depends on traffic, demand, supply, and energy is no different, right? The wholesale price of energy is moving all the time. We see a future where the opportunities in front of the end users, the consumers, will be dynamic. Hey, today your car charging can be free between 12 and 5 if you were to take the load, or bring your load available, and you'll get, like you said, $5 per kilowatt hour, right, back in return. So this dynamic nature of pricing that can create huge incentive for people to truly participate in this grid is only possible if we know which customer has how much of opportunity and capacity available behind the meter, right? You can't just flatly say, it doesn't matter you are charging at 3 kilowatt or 15 kilowatt, you're going to get the same money. That doesn't work if you want to completely dynamic, make the market super dynamic, right? So let me take a couple of minutes to touch upon a different topic. We know the technology is available, we know possibilities are available, but we know it is very hard to make things happen. So from a process perspective, from adoption of technology perspective, let's hear from both of you. Let's say we'll start with Bill. What are the challenges that you face internal to the organization in actually getting the adoption going for these technologies?
It's cultural. Utilities have been, we all know this. So utilities have been doing things very similar for a very long time. We're usually not the early adopters. We usually don't jump in, don't want to be the first, and that's not a bad thing. When we have change happening so fast and opportunities, most of it has to do with, on my experience, is really the culture and the expectations and the resistance and going against the grain. So for example, on the engineering side, sure, we're showing them that there's these tools that can help them do load planning AI training the model that basically says, hey, here's my issue, here's my solution, and it providing a little bit of an output as a starting point, no different than coding and the opportunities that are there. But they were trained, they went to school, they did it a certain way. There's a lot of skepticism. So what we're finding is that we've just got to help our employees realize that this is a tool for them. It isn't about less employees specifically doing that. It's about being more efficient and then doing it much, much differently. So I would say it's probably, we're running into just how do we help people become more comfortable with the technology, and then also how do we bring them along and do it in the right way. The AI component, it's a journey. So my suggestion with work, it took us a little bit of, you'd think we'd know better, but just to show, hey, this is where we want to go. This is probably 5 years down the road, maybe 10 years down the road. But here are the incremental steps, and just here's where we're at. We were very clear about it. We're just at the beginning. If it doesn't work, we're gonna change, we're gonna adopt. But utilities, the innovation side, I'm just very fortunate that, I get to do the fun stuff with the innovation, get to push the organization a little bit, but it definitely is a cultural thing in helping people understand what the opportunity is.
Thank you, Bill.
The way we are thinking about it at ERCOT is, the world around us is changing really fast in Texas. The grid is transforming quite rapidly. And then we still have to do the basic things that we need to do in terms of frequency and voltage and keeping the grid reliable and markets efficient. The way at least we have visualized tying these two things together is innovation and transformation. There has been quite a bit of effort within ERCOT in terms of spinning a separate org that I'm leading right now, focused on innovation and transformation. And collaboration is the key, Abhay. One of the reasons why we reached out to you and did the POC was all about collaboration and trying to utilize the technologies that is out there to see what potential exists, right? So for us, it's all about innovation, transformation, and collaborating with lots of partners, not just internally, but externally as well.
We have seen the same thing. For example, we are working on grid modernization, grid planning with many utilities, and we see that there's a top-down buy-in which comes fast. Many of you sitting in here are in leadership positions, and you can see the benefit. But then bottoms-up is very important. Let's say there are 20 grid planners who are sitting and doing this stuff, but they've been doing that for the last 2 decades. And influencing them and showing them the big picture and actually getting them on with you is very important, because it's not like you flip the switch, you give them new tools and they start using it. So there is an investment that goes into bringing your workforce, your call center agents, your grid planners, etc., into using the new technology. So there's a task that has to be done bottoms up besides the top down here. So my leaving message here is AI is not just a word. Most of the times we hear just generic stuff about AI. Our goal was to double click a little bit and talk about really the application of AI in some use cases, and specifically one AI. There are many different AIs, right? It's not just one AI. There are like hundreds of different AI technologies, etc. Embrace the change, use the data, use the information, and a lot of technology companies are here to help. Some of the leading utilities are here to help, and that's our time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Venkat.